Hey, this is Brodor. Just a quick heads up. The audio quality on this episode is a little bit sketch because it was recorded in a moving automobile using a relatively inexpensive, cheap handheld audio recording device. But John was a bit apprehensive about being on the show, which we'll get into a little bit. Ultimately, he capitulated and allowed his wisdom to be shared with you, the audience. About 15 minutes after John and I finished recording this episode, we were on the phone talking about scheduling another one. I think that John was much more comfortable conversing and being recorded by the end of the episode. So hopefully we'll have him back on the show soon.
This is Mikey Mason, and you're listening to Why We Game.
I'm Brodor. This is Why We Game. My guest today is the elusive John Perks, who is the jack of all trades and master of many for the Fantasy Shop. He does just about everything that I did when I was at the Fantasy Shop, but he is also he's a very close friend and one of the most remarkable people that I ever had the pleasure of serving with as an employee. And even though I told him when we first met that we would never be friends because I'm his boss, I love the guy and we're coming home from a road trip. John, how are you?
Bashful and embarrassed now that you've given me these titles and but flattered at the same time, and honored to be here.
Yeah, you're one of my favorite people. Now, so if the audio quality is not great, audience, that is because John and I are literally in his car driving through southern Illinois back to Missouri, coming back from a LARP event, because John's a big LARPer.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Well, let's take a step back. So, John, you are how old?
36 years old.
36 years old, all right. And you have been gaming for how long?
It depends on your definition of the word gaming.
All right, well, let's go full tradition.
I've been playing games pretty regularly since I have memories. It goes back. I think we were talking earlier, and we were saving this for the podcast. And I just want to have a conversation here, because it's great telling stories, but knowing this recorder's here is fascinating. It's okay. You need to have good audio quality, though, because some of these stories are worth telling, and I've been remarkably blessed by the amount of people in my life that have introduced me to the world of games, the world of storytelling, the world of fantasy and adventure, and stories of good and evil. I love to go back to being a young one. My mother's brothers, Fernando and Carlos, they're old school gamers. They've been playing D&D and been a part of the SCA, the Society of Creative Anachronism, since the early 80s, I think. I don't have specific dates. All that I know is that growing up as a kid, my mother, she had maps of Middle Earth and the amazing Hildebrandt Brothers calendars.
I suspect that I've seen them, but I don't know the name. What are those?
The Hildebrandt Brothers did a bunch of great fantasy art for J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, I know. Okay.
Yeah. So, the Hobbit, the Fellowship of the Rings, I grew up with that on the walls at home, and my mother read Dragon Rise of Herd and loved books and stories, so I was introduced to all this really young. My uncle's rooms were full of we're looking, so the Society of Creative Anachronism that they played in was a sort of medieval reenactment society, essentially, where they fight as armored combatants and reenact medieval courts and learn arts and sciences and trades and reenact how things were created in the Middle Ages. So always stories of knights in shining armor and wizards and magic and in my uncle's room was literally piles of armor. And on his shelf are all these fantastical books, probably role-playing books, probably novels, all sorts of cool stuff, but with figurines of wizards and dragons. So as early as I can remember, I was around miniatures, and I was around these cool little things, and my parents talked about fairies, and I remember going back now, and I'm exploring the logs of my memory here, right? I remember when I was real little, I had a bunch of Legos. They were all out on the downstairs in our family's basement. And I remember waking up one day, and there was this fantastical castle that was made. And I asked my mom where it came from, and she told me with all sincerity that the brownies made it. And as a kid, I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. As an adult, I can look back and assume that my parents probably had some friends over who were also nerds and enjoyed making the castle out of all those funny Legos, and it was darn cool. But that's the kind of imagination that I was introduced to as a kid. So, that playful storytelling was impactful. I went to St. George Catholic grade school as a young one.
St. George the Dragon Slayer?
St. George
the Dragon Slayer. Of course you went to the Dragon Slayer Catholic school.
So, dude, there's a picture of this knight in, centurion, Roman armor slaying a serpent in the back of the church. That's some of the earliest iconography I have in my head. To my friends of dragons, that was also, interestingly, Danielle Spur, who also fascinatingly went to the very small Catholic school for a single year. Really, really weird small world. She was traumatized by that because she has always loved dragons. And how does the Catholic Church is representing slaying these amazing mythical beasts? So everyone reacts to things a little bit different. Me, as a young little dude, I loved the idea of adventuring. And I've always loved myself some hobbits. As far as gaming...
Now, you love hobbits. Is that because of your genetics, or did you just wake up one day and you looked at your feet that were too short, 3 sizes too broad, and thick with fur?
Probably nurture more than the actual nature. My feet are woefully unhairy. I wear shoes too much. I have a feeling that if I wore less shoes, that I would stop rubbing the follicles off. That'd be cool, but I've never been able to put that to the test. Yeah. Early gaming, I learned how to play games like Hero Quest, and I don't remember who produced it at the time, but I played Dungeon.
The Dungeon board game?
Yeah, the Dungeon board game.
Yeah,
I think it's now produced by Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, I believe WotC does
probably
it.
Hasbro.
Sure, right, yeah. I guess I always say that. I say WotC now. WotC isn't really a company of its own. It's all just a wing of Hasbro now. I think it's the way it works, but I'm not that sure.
Well, and I think the Avalon Hill, it might have been done by Avalon Hill for a little bit, and I think recently the Avalon Hill brand has been brought into the board game section of Hasbro, is my understanding of it. So that's why we're seeing things like Betrayal and House on the Hill and Axis and Allies and things of that.
Yeah, you got to dust off that nostalgia.
Getting put into different categories. Anyway, it's a story about my gaming origins right now. So I learned how to do that with my grandma. She taught me how to play those games.
Your grandmother?
My grandmother.
Played the board game Dungeon.
Correct.
With you.
Correct.
We were talking earlier about just being blessed and having a good life and wonderful opportunities. You understand, that's fucking amazing. I would have loved to play Dungeon with my grandma.
It blows me away that not everyone's grandma didn't do this with people. Also keep in mind, my family are some of the kindest people and wonderfully supportive. Also very involved in the Catholic Church. They come from strong faith in their religion, right? And my uncles were playing Dungeons and Dragons and this is ancient history to me. This is the stories of my forefathers, but when Dungeons and Dragons was up against the great church for condemning everyone playing Dungeons and Dragons as demon worshippers and witchcraft and all that shit. So my grandmother, being an observant, kind, understanding woman, saw my uncles playing this game of make-believe with their friends and was able to understand that was all propaganda put forth by I don't even remember all the myths, but the propaganda that is demonizing something that doesn't need to be demonized, doesn't need to be censored. It was always very accepting household in many, many ways. And yeah, so that's my grandmother saw with her own two eyes. This is not demons, this is not devil worship. We're going to play some things and we're going to go slay dragons. It's going to be good.
How old were you when you're doing these board games and you're introduced?
I was probably 7 or 8 at this time. I got my first personal copy of Hero Quest when I was 10. I got that for Christmas. We got to play it with the family, and it was amazing.
When then did you take the next step into the deeper waters of the hobby and start doing other games? What was after this initial childhood exposure?
Milton Bradley games through all that, right? Monopoly and all the family game night kind of. Monopoly, Yahtzee. It was just something that was regularly done. My mother still to this day is like, I thought we were going to get together to play games, and in fact we ended up just like sitting around talking, like not playing games. I want to play some games, huh?
Yeah, your mom's like me. Yeah. Should we get together to hang out, or we're going to fucking game?
Yeah.
So we're going to hang out, we'll hang out, but if we came together to game, let's fucking game.
Yeah, let's do it. Anyway, so that's always just been a regular fixture in the household, and I remember getting exposed to, we always had Legos, right? And my buddy brought the 1997 Citadel catalogs for Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 to our 7th grade class. And that's when I fell in love with Warhammer Fantasy and dreamed about 40K. I didn't get into 40K until after I started working for a fantasy shop, frankly. We were 7th graders with no money, but drooling over these catalogs that some hobby store gave my buddy. I think it was the hobby shop down in South City.
Oh, back in South, yeah, Ken's old shop. Yeah.
So it was on the corner of Neosho and Hampton at the time. Just down the street from where another uncle lived. And that was the first time that I discovered miniatures and the game of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. And I bought a High Elf and a Lizardman skink. So this will date it. I couldn't tell you exactly the years. There's the year that Bretonnians and Lizardmen were introduced. There's a starter set that my buddy bought. My buddy Chris bought this, and he loved there were the big, cool castle pieces to it. And these were the first Warhammer miniatures that we ever put together. And of course, we're kids. And luckily, we had a bunch of Legos. So this is also where we learned how to proxy. We had a legitimate unit, and then we would take our little Lego stands and put our dudes on there and arm them with their spears and march them across the battlefield to play the game of Warhammer Fantasy Battles at my buddy Charlie's house. And so we had a group of friends who's, I can definitely point back to Charlie and Chris and Jason. We were the nerd pod that grew up together, and I am eternally grateful to both Charlie and Chris for really pushing the hobby forward. Charlie was always our game master and always took that mantle on, and it is a noble profession that I am truly, truly, truly full of respect for, because he put in so much work and dealt with all the bullshit that we threw at us, and we did not take care of his books to the degree that he would have liked. He was a saint, and still is, in fact.
So you guys are still friends?
I haven't seen them as much as I'd like. I would say so.
Okay,
yeah,
all right. Do you communicate on the Book of Faces or anything like that?
Not as much as I'd like. I get busy.
No, I understand. Yeah. Well, and the thing that's weird is as we age, life gets in the way, right? There's a sweet spot in high school, early college where you can just really, really indulge the hobby, but we're not in that place anymore.
Correct.
Which I long for those days, but no longer have the constitution for them.
No doubt. Yeah, super nostalgic. So around that time, I'm talking 5th, 6th grade, we played D&D. Charlie got one of the starter sets. I don't remember if it was White Box or AD&D starter set exactly. I remember my buddy Jason had this shield that caused fear. Okay, yeah. I distinctly remember going around and him like fearing everybody in the bar and us murdering everybody, and Charlie being really frustrated by magic items from then on out. So after that point, we tended to play relatively magic item less games, and that whole evolution of how we gamed through high school changed a lot. I met some other very good friends. Charlie's younger brother Jeremy started playing with us a ton, and Ben and all these people are really, really important to this story as well. Evil Ben was amazing and took me through high school and joined me in college. He was great, and also like ties into the LARP world now. So many, many lifelong friends have been kindled and forged at the gaming table for all my life, honestly. We played D&D in AD&D in grade school. We started doing D20 stuff with the Star Wars D20 system. We dabbled in White Wolf. We dabbled in Dark Ages. I don't think I ever played Masquerade. We had the books, but we played Dark Ages when Charlie's folks moved to a new house. I remember Ben, Jeremy, Charlie, and I playing a game of Dark Ages, like in Dark Ages Constantinople.
Oh yeah, I remember the book, yeah.
Dude, and it was probably one of the most immersive, story-driven games that we had played, and we get constantly nostalgic for that. And honestly, after that, I stopped hanging out with them. I became a stoner, and I got distracted by many other things. I don't know. I've always been a little flaky and a little flighty, and not necessarily recognizing, oh man, I'm easily distracted, and I get pulled in many, many directions.
Right. No, you have to be pinned down. I remember when you texted me about, hey, I texted you, I'm like, John, what time are you coming to my house tomorrow for the road trip? And you're like, 6 or 7. And I immediately texted you back, and I was like, 6 or 7. Because I knew you have to be something to be held down and forced to pick.
Which I truly appreciate that you really actually make me commit to a decision, because I have always been afraid of I didn't want to disappoint Mike. I don't want to disappoint people. I love these important people in my life. I didn't want to be late, so I didn't want to overcommit. But I made it there by 6.
You did?
That was weirdly miraculous, but that is how we started our adventure this weekend.
So anyway, you were talking about role playing.
Yeah, like we go through the stages of role playing. We did a lot of role playing in high school. Again, the constitution to do that. Like I worked at a McDonald's up the street, and I was an open shift at 15 and a half. So we would game until everyone passed out, then I'd stay up playing Age of Empires until my shift at 4:35 a.m., and I'd go open the store.
So Age of Empires, that is
Age of Empires, the real-time strategy video game where you're playing as civilization.
One of the rare games that I played a lot. Rare games I played a lot. Yeah, particularly, I think, the third one. But again, that's not about me. So you went through your sort of, not rebellious, but you went through a funk where you just kind of disengaged from some stuff.
Well, dude, and high school was weird. Like, I went to high school, I met a bunch of other friends, and I started, like, discovering girls, and I just started getting distracted by hormones and all this other stuff. So, like, Charlie and Ben and Chris and a bunch of my other buddies also went to high school with me, and frankly, like, I was probably a pretty shitty friend, because I got distracted by the glamour of all these other things, and we don't have to go too much into this, but I definitely could have been a better friend and a better player for sure, but we still tried to get together and do our thing.
But then you went off to college.
Then I went off to college.
And you're gaming in college.
And I didn't do much gaming in college. Ben and I went. Ben was my roommate. Evil Ben went to Truman State University with me, and he is amazing. Really big soft spot for this guy. So he stayed pretty engaged with the gaming geek community, while I continued to go down the debauched world of hippie thing, and weirdly, like, I wish there was more sex. It was mostly drugs and getting drunk a lot, and I had a bunch of really good friends who also, like, they played music, and we hung out a bunch, and it was really good vibes, for sure, not just debauchery. I shouldn't distill it down to that. Made a lot of good friends there as well, and a number of them were pledging a fraternity, so I pledged that fraternity that year, learned a lot about myself and my limits, and how distracted I am.
John, were you in a frat?
I pledged. I never learned the secret passwords.
Okay.
I never.
John, I was in a frat.
I know. I didn't pass the tests, Mike. I got distracted. I didn't make grades, and then I left the school. I was there for a single year. I fell in love with frankly, the mystery and the romanticism of this fraternal brotherhood of professionals and badass dudes. It was really cool. And frankly, the people I was with, the pledge class was like 21. Fuck, I probably would get made fun of by everyone I was with for not knowing exactly everyone's name right now. I'm not worthy, and here I am. That's a whole nother rabbit hole of lifetime. Suffice it to say, I did not actively do any sort of tabletop gaming in college much. There were a couple board games that we played. We played the Civilization board game, like Ben and I. Ben and I hung out a ton and saw each other as roommates, but we didn't do a whole lot of active gaming stuff. But frankly, I drank a lot that year, and I could not tell you for certain if I did in fact do a bunch of gaming and just forgot about it. It was pretty bad.
Yeah, moderation in college, kids.
I didn't know that. I played a lot of Diablo 2 on the computer. I discovered a shared network of...
What can I do for you?
Yeah, love that. I played Civilization on the computer a bunch. Pretty monogamous in my video games. I find games that I can play for 1,000 hours and still find a new sandbox to discover in that game. That's pretty much how I roll. I video gamed. I did Diablo, Civilization, Age of Empires, the continuing to play these games, but I didn't get out and socialize much with the smart nerd crew that I'd kind of grown up with. I was easily distractible. Here I am being easily distractible again as I'm discovering new memory lanes. I'm sure I've been playing video games off and on since then, for sure.
You wanted to take a step back from it.
I did. I took a pause here to remember the fact that I've been incredibly fortunate to have met so many amazing people and to have been pulled in so many directions throughout my life. My gaming journey, my journey that brought me here today with this friend started with family, with imagination, support, and positive relationship with gaming. It turned naturally into this really tight-knit, fun journey of exploration with some friends in elementary school. Those friends joined me in high school, and I beat myself up over moving on and finding new friends at that time. Keep in mind through all this, I never felt, at this point, I feel like I started to drift from group to group to group with different people, and I have to understand at the time, I think I was starting to discover at this time in my life that I was exhibiting symptoms of depression in ways that I didn't know what that was at the time, but I never felt worthy of how amazing everyone else was around me. I idolized Charlie and his ability to run the games for us. I truly looked up to Chris and his brother, and seeing us all come together, it was a lot, and I never really felt good enough. And this caused me, apparently I'm friendly, and I make friends easily. I make a good impression pretty quickly. I found myself finding new groups, and I met some amazing young women, I met some amazing young men, and I found new friends, and we discovered new stuff. Ben Whiteman was a super close friend throughout all of high school. Charlie Thiel and these guys, there's my fucking tribe, and I kind of wandered on and mingled with the other tribe. I don't want to miss anyone in this journey of my life. There's so many people that have impacted me in wonderful ways, and dude, the whole scene where I discovered music, and I discovered the joy of living free and being out in the sun and living a different kind of vibe. It was good. So I went through high school, and I switched schools in the middle of high school. At this time, I actually came back to gaming more with Charlie and them. That's really when we got to the heart of our D&D stuff. I was more present with them and more consistent showing up, and I hope I was a better teammate and a better player at their table during that time. Similarly, at that time, I went to a new high school, and I pretty much kept to myself at that new high school. I read a lot of books. I probably played video games. I probably smoked a lot of weed. I probably don't remember a whole lot of it. This is a time in my life, didn't have a cell phone, don't have photos. But I made a few long-term friendships at that time. And that comes full circle after I come back from high school. Met an incredible woman in high school who later became my best friend by far, the closest, amazing individual who is full of fire and passion, and introduced me to the LARP group that I am now in.
Would you, for the audience that may not know, I mean, I'm sure that they do, but when you say LARP, you're talking about live-action role-playing. Now, what is that?
Yeah, so live-action role-playing is going to be where people in person, as opposed to at a tabletop, where you're sitting down, pen and paper, it's the playground of the imagination. In LARP, you are taking the playground of the imagination and doing your best to act it out in person. Almost, and I love the way that you put this earlier, almost the weird way that it's like theater kids and band kids coming together, where we're acting in a way and applying a scene of swords and sorcery stuff. The game that I discovered here, my very close friend Jen brought me to Amtgard after I came back home after college.
So when I say LARP is just like saying the generic term role-playing game.
Sure.
And saying Amtgard might be like saying, oh, well, this is chivalry and sorcery. And, you know, the other ones are Call of Cthulhu and Savage Worlds and yada, yada, yada. So, you know, role-playing doesn't just mean Dungeons and Dragons, period. LARP does not just mean I'm hanging out with my buddies and we're dressing up like vampires, which is perfectly a viable, wonderful way to play the game. But you guys are actually out there, instead of having a miniature on the table, you're in garb, you're armed, you're throwing the spells, you're shooting the bow, you're fighting with the sword, and so it's your character, your creation, the class that you chose, but you're stuck to your fucking stats.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it. Yeah, I like the way that you compared. Yeah, I like that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Just watching it this weekend, it was like, well, it really was eye-opening to see and be able to think, well, God, I just would look down my nose at LARPing because I just thought it was I wasn't nice about it. I'm not going to go into my insults because they're really good and hurtful. But
well, look, man, like everybody finds a thing that they love. And,
yeah, well,
and just like in role-playing game, there's going to be some people who swear by D&D, and other people who won't do anything but Vampire the Masquerade because that's where they get their jam. And in the LARP scene, like you said, there's many different systems to play the game. Some have different emphasis on the game. There's some very creative, amazing, bold individuals who have more bravery to put on a show and to immerse themselves into their characters. I don't have the attention span and the constitution to do that. I get embarrassed too easily, frankly. But there's some really, really cool LARPs that have really high production value, and you get to wear incredible outfits and do cosplay, but play as that character in that way. There are many different LARPs, and the way that Amtgard rolls is it's a boffer sport, you can say. We use what we call boffer weapons. They're light weapons that are padded, and we smack each other with them.
If you'll allow me to indulge in some specificity, John,
thank you.
I think what you mean is that someone took a graphite shaft of a golf club, cut it down, And then they put foam around it, a specific type of foam, so it's lightweight, and you use the graphite shaft because it is also lightweight, because this particular game is a game of speed or stick tag, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
And you guys wrap these pieces of graphite rod up in foam and thwack each other, and it doesn't hurt, but you can hit each other pretty hard.
Correct. Yeah, and the game itself is old. So much of life and opportunities and things that we discover are guided by who we know and the timing that we discover those things and what opportunities are presented to us, right? I alluded to my uncles being in the FCA when I was young, introducing me to that world of high production reenactment. And this is more than LARPing. This is the Society of Creative Anachronism, in that they are not just role-playing, it's that they are trying to recreate and anachronize.
So basically what they're doing is they're living history, right? But they're doing it fantasy-free. Correct. So they're doing it with real steel plates as close to what we understand to be of the period as possible.
Exactly. I know very little about the intricacies of SCA. Let me start off with that as well. I romanticized this, and I saw my uncles doing it, and it was always amazing, but not something that I really delved into. As a child, I went to events to witness my uncle fighting in tournaments, but I didn't understand how they historically register their names to make sure that the name of every person, the persona that they're taking on in history, is actually a historically accurate name for the period that they're choosing, that they're using heraldry that matches that period, and the colors that might be available, say, in the dyes for the clothing of that period, things like that. It's interesting, historical reenactment. Really cool, and man, always felt above my reach. It's probably expensive, probably took time and effort. So seeing my uncles and their wives participating in this amazing society, creating art, creating music, it was always on a pedestal in my mind that I didn't know if I would ever be able to reach. But it was still something that I loved being a part of, and I look forward to maybe one day, if we had the bandwidth, to join it. Anyway, come around to the opportunity presented itself to check out Amcard. My best friend Jen brought me to come to this game with her boyfriend and a number of other friends. They were pretty established in this game at the time, and I discovered this was South City Carondelet Park in St. Louis at the realm that they called Western Gate.
Right, so because St. Louis is the gateway to the West, right?
So we come out and there's a bunch of people, dozens and dozens, maybe 40, 50 people that met out every week, hitting other nerds with foam swords every single week. And everyone wears garb, everyone wears special outfits that they made that is supposed to look kind of like medieval fantasy garb. And these people are running around with essentially pool noodles on golf club sticks, or pool noodles on PVC pipes, and smacking each other. And they have magic, and they have classes. I got to play a barbarian that first day, and I discovered the poor man's SCA with a swords and sorcery fantasy flair, and I was hooked. I didn't know that this could even be possible. Expanded my imagination, expanded my horizons. So, I immediately went and raided old, unused armor scraps that Fernando had, and that Fernando Carlos. I think I asked Fernando if I could use the armor, but I wore an old leather thing that I kind of made into armor. And I wore this deer hide skirt on my shoulders. Also keep in mind, at this time I had a huge mane of dreadlocks. I started growing those in high school, and this, in my mind, was weirdly intrinsic to my identity at the time. But as hairstyles go, I had a big mane of dreadlocks that worked perfectly with my barbarian outfit. I looked freaking cool, and I built this big old flail because I wanted to make stuff, and I had concept of what Boffer weapons might look like. I brought it out, and they immediately told me, I think I've made some other weapons too. I probably made a big javelin, but I remember distinctly the flail, because I brought it out. I borrowed pantyhose from my mother to make the head of the flail. I put little, nuggets of foam in there to make the chain of the flail on this big PVC pipe, and it was multi-headed. There were 6 or 7 flails. It was really wacky. I bring up the dreadlocks because the flail kind of mimicked my dreadlocks.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, multi-headed flail's awesome.
And I go out I'm ready to fucking rock, and they're like, dude, you're gonna hurt someone with that. That's not allowed in our game. You can't play with that flail. And I was like, that's fine. Whatever. We're gonna move on, and we're gonna keep finding joy.
Yeah, what can I play?
Yeah, what can I play with? We figured it out. I immediately loved jumping into the weapon construction hobby side of things. I was making friends and discovered this whole subculture society that met every week, every Sunday. And it quickly became a passion. And I've met lifelong friends at that hobby, just like many gamers have met lifelong friends around the table in high school and in D&D and at conventions and things like that.
Have you been monogamous to Amtgard, or have you played other of the LARP-style games?
I have visited a couple LARP-style games, but honestly, the scene and the group, the vibrant group that we had at our area, again, very fortunate that that was enough. There were enough of us there every week that we always had stuff going on. I've been pretty monogamous to that game. I know a number of other people that have traveled to other games and brought back stories and adapted new technologies from weapon construction and fighting styles, things of that nature. But yeah, pretty much stuck with Amtgard. It's been enough. And I played that 2006, 2009 time, 3-4 years. I met the love of my life at that game, weirdly. I want to say the rest is history, but a whole another lifetime has happened since then. We've been together 15 years. I met her on her birthday. It was the first time she had ever come out to Amtgard. She lives in my same city, but weirdly she was visiting Kentucky at this amazing weekend event called Knoblander. Knoblander was put on as, and everyone talked about, it was the event to go to.
It sounds like Knoblander. Knobland feels like a field of dicks. It's just a wheat field of cock.
I would not be surprised if this is what some designers had in mind, but this is this is our humor. Fuck, man, that event was amazing. I was a 6th level scout. I was a max level scout. I was so proud. God, I was such a goober. But I went out with my fighting company. It was the group of people that we fought with. We were the Brothers Grimm because 3 of the dudes were brothers, and they were all goth and stuff. They had a sickle on their heraldry, and we all wore black and silver, and we were gonna assassinate everyone. Knoblander as an event was I want to say a 48-hour role-playing scenario where you went through woods and ran over rivers and accomplished big battle game objectives where you're stealing sheep from the opponent's reserves, and while you're stealing sheep, there's somebody dressed up like a hydra coming out and attacking you, and monster teams. There were people the logistics team put on monster NPCs to fight all of the adventurers. More people playing this game than I'd ever experienced. And at this time, I had been playing about a year and a half, and I was fortunate enough to meet the love of my life and the person that I've spent the rest of my life with. And she swept me off my feet, but mostly I think I swept her off hers. It depends on who you're asking.
Well, you're dreamy. You're both actually quite dreamy. You are I know I often say many things glibly, but you two are a fetching couple.
Yeah, we're kind of adorable. It's amazing. It's amazing. About perfect, man. So my whole nerd journey, every moment informs what the next moment holds, right? Everything that we have experienced up until now informs the next moment going forward. Dude, I was not a confident person. I was not good at meeting girls before all this, but I'm going to go into this nerdiness right now because this was a weird dream come true that probably should have gotten me slapped, but did not have confidence. I never really spoke my mind. I was always friendly and kind and nice. I didn't know how to, like, ask a girl for her number and shit. But, like, I seemed to be talking to these women. And I remember something about she wanted a dude with balls and that they'd speak their mind or whatever it was. And I was like, all right, I can fucking do this challenge. I'm a 6th level scout. I am self-actualized. And there's a whole more amazing informing how I was ready at 21 to ask this girl for any level of, like, kindness or attention. Anyway, I'm easily distracted, and we met and we talked for a little bit, and I remember in my mind, like, okay, she said that thing. Who knows? I'll shoot my shot later. I get distracted, we have a big battle, I'm meeting with my friend Jenny and her boyfriend and all our friends, and we're strategizing, getting ready to murder people. And I loved making stuff. I started to make armor, and I regularly supplied some of our friends with armor and arms. And I'm running back and forth between our tents and our camp to the, like, staging area. As I'm running back, I think to myself, ooh, I'm going to see if that Lydia girl's up there. Like, I'm going to go see if I can say hi. I roll up to her tent. She's at, like, the top of this hill, and there is light, like, backlit from behind her tent. And I happened to catch, like, the most, man, it was like a fucking movie moment. This babe is silhouetted in her tent with the light backdrop as she's, like, changing and getting ready for this event, right? And I just walk up, and I'm bashful and like, oh, wow, hold on a minute. But being a virtuous individual, I'm like, okay, like, and again, it's just a silhouette, but boy, is this lady fetching. But me trying to be polite and trying to be a decent human being and definitely not a dirtbag, I cough and I'm like, hey, if you have a moment, I had a question for you. I also need to contextualize this with, we seem to be getting on fairly well in the conversation previous to this. So me coming up to her, I didn't feel like I was being creepy, but you fucking don't know, so you ask and you communicate, right?
Right.
Be respectful, be polite, and don't be trash. Anyway, be polite. I stole that first glimpse, and upon the realization I have to turn my back, and I wait politely for this woman to get decent and come out when she is ready for me to give her any level of attention, right? So she comes out, and I awkwardly ham up, like, so I don't really know how to go about doing this, but, like, this sounds really cool. If you would have it, it would be really neat to fight for your favor this weekend or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but essentially I got out that, like, hey, fair maiden, I'd love to fight for your favor this weekend. Normally you hear that kind of thing, and maybe at some point you get a big old awe, but at other points you're like, oh, come on, man, like, that's awkward.
Yeah, no, sure, it's a little lame, but you're adorable, and you're in costume, and she's in costume. I think it's fucking romantic.
I found it romantic too, and the most important factor of all of it, this woman was breathless at the time. I was also in the best physical shape I'd ever been. Beautiful, long mane of dreadlocks down back my back, in probably the best shape I've ever been in or never will be. It was the only moment that I really had to pull this off, because I grew hobbit-like after that. But that's what happens after you meet the girl of your dreams and you get comfortable. So not to toot my own horn, but apparently she thought I was something special and was honored that I would even ask for that.
See?
And
I love you guys.
Fucking amazing.
Oh.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, it was the beginning of the end. We started hanging out, and so this is other weird journey, okay? This is more journey of gaming, is Lydia's introduction to my life. She was there because of some other friends who convinced her to go to this event. One of those other friends would later be the person who got me the job at the fantasy show. Meeting Lydia in my life was, I had little knowledge this was going to happen, but that meeting her would eventually mean that I would get to discover a career in the gaming industry at a later point. She was taken to the event by some friends that she was playing D&D with, the dungeon master of that D&D group was one of the managers of the Fantasy Shop.
And for those people who don't know, the Fantasy Shop is a 4-store comic and game chain that has been in St. Louis for 40 years.
Yeah. I met Lydia. I played Amtgard. I got laid off from the job I was in. I was working for Pest Shield, a pest control company that installed a new homes being built is where my work was being done. And little did I know, but there was a housing crisis in 2008, and the number of houses that were going up were lowering. Frankly, I was lazy and unorthodox and looked unprofessional because I had a big old dreadlocks. And I didn't do as much hard work as I could have in the right ways. I can always be better. At some point along the journey, I played a bunch of WoW, which isn't really gaming.
Well, now see, I would make the argument that, and I did so with some of the people over the weekend here, but I would make the argument that WoW is gaming, right? So
it took me away. Okay. Look,
it's a tough argument.
I need to downplay
gamers
WoW.
are people too.
I need to downplay World of Warcraft.
And video gamers are people.
I need to downplay World of Warcraft in my life because that world and that environment offered me everything that I ever needed in life ever again. I could fish. I could do daily quests. I could meet people. I could kill monsters. I didn't need anything else in my life. So I played for a while, and I stopped hanging out with friends. I made really good connections with people online, and I started making commitments with people online. And I started making less commitments to try to find a new job because I was frustrated by that. It was really easy for me to mine gold, really easy for me to get my grind in and get that satisfaction in life. But dude, I was depressed as heck, and it was not a positive time in my life. I made good friends, and dude, World of Warcraft was a blast. Like, there are a couple people in my guild that was very, very close to me. But honestly, some of my good friends who brought me to the guild in real life, I stopped interacting with them in real life. It was not a healthy thing for my friendships, for my life, for my home relationship. It was bad, man. And that was the time that I discovered I don't get to play MMOs, and I don't get to make commitments with people online because it's too easy to forget everything else.
All right, it's very simple to fall into that cyber world.
And I certainly don't begrudge anyone else loving these games. Like, there's many people who find healthy balances with this stuff, and tons of talented, creative, amazing people who are part of these cultures online, and I love it. I just know I lose myself in those things. So that's an agreement I made with myself a long time ago. I promised my wife that I'm never gonna do again. So that's one of the few lines that we have, frankly.
So you're unemployed, you're playing a fuck ton of WoW.
Dude, I got unemployed, and I continued to play WoW, and I was told, we were hanging out with Scott from the Fantasy Shop, who's one of Lydia's old good friends. He would come by and we'd watch shows every week, and he told me about an opening at the Fantasy Shop, and I was like, cool, well shoot, I'll check this out, that sounds cool. Keep in mind, I wasn't playing board games, I wasn't role-playing in a while, I didn't have a whole lot of current industry knowledge, and I was never a comic guy. I read a lot of novels, but I was never a comic guy. I heard there was an opening at the Fantasy Shop in the North County location, so I went and I got my suit and tie, or got my tie and my button-up shirt, and I like to think I'd cleaned up okay then, and I went in and I introduced myself to Rick, the manager there. And dude, I had done so many interviews over the last 6 to 8 months, and I had never had an interview that was it was very different from anything else. I'm used to a different kind of either professional or not giving a crap environment. Rick sat me down in this little school chair in the back of the store, and we had a conversation together. And the man could have put his hand on my knee. We were so close. It was really weird, but also incredibly disarming. There were no physical barriers between us. It was a conversation for him to get to know me, and I feel like I got to know our company in a new way. Keep in mind, I grew up playing games and going to the Fantasy Shop all of my life. I had the assumption that the fantasy shop was a national chain. I thought it was like Walmart or Walgreens or freaking I thought it was a staple, and because it was everywhere in St. Louis when I grew up, it was not the little hobby shop that I went to. It was the big place that had multiple locations. So I assumed it was everywhere. Little did I know that, in fact, this was a small business owned by a couple here in St. Louis that had found a way to be in a business for 40 years and had grown this through years and years of learning about how to run a business, how to do a specialty game store, how to provide the friendly local game store experience.
People are driving like fucking assholes. I guess we are back in St. Louis.
Hey, here we are.
Yeah, we're back home. Everyone drives like a goddamn cunt. Anyway, I'm sorry, John.
That's delightful. I think I took the wrong exit too.
Downtown St. Louis, the MLK Bridge. No, you're good, buddy?
Yeah, sure, we're good.
Okay. Yeah, you're fine, man.
So we are, I go in and I assume it's a big chain. This was not a big chain interview. It was weird. It was fascinating. It was very personal, very disarming. And I was like, hey, that's pretty neat. I was then brought in for a second interview, and this is where I get to meet the man in the seat beside me. This interview was different than the first one, for sure. He sat me down. There's Rick and Mike together, a table between me. Mike is wearing his I Heart Buffy.
With the stake, with the stake through the heart. Yeah.
I remember that distinctly. But Mike is an intimidating fucker.
No, I'm not. I'm 5 foot. I'm not even 5'9". Look, I'm fat.
But you are stern, and you
also true.
And you took it to a different level than it was with Rick. With Rick, it was very much a conversation about who am I? Talk to me about your background. Talk to me about what you bring to the table. Yada yada. And Mike brought me in to a more professional level. Also, with the caveat that I'm the only one with the tie. He's wearing a I Heart Buffy t-shirt. And I didn't get the gig. There was another guy who was working there who also interviewed, who just had better product knowledge than I did, man. He had more current knowledge. He read a bunch of comics. He was a better fit for that store.
I will not say anything else besides the fact that the person who made the decision to hire you was wrong. I disagreed with that decision. I made it clear that I disagreed with that decision, and that person ended up, being shown the door because they did not have the quality that you had as an individual. And I don't blow my own horn very often, but it was obvious in those interviews. Obvious to me.
Well, Mike, I got to tell you, empirically, maybe it was the wrong decision. I know my destiny was to work at the St. Charles Fantasy Shop store under your management, as you managed the St. Charles store at that time, and you were being groomed and learning to be the general manager of the company at the time. That was my destiny. Like, I'm not a comic guy. Working for Rick, I may not have stuck around as long as I did. And I would not have learned to enjoy the diversity of the products in the way that I did. And I wouldn't have been challenged to meet as many people and organize events and truly embrace the right spot for me was on your crew up at St. Charles.
So
So what was nice, I didn't get the gig initially, and I had a conversation with Rick about why I didn't get the job. He talked to me for 45 minutes.
Yeah, he was a solid dude, man.
Rick,
I mean, he had his issues, but we all do.
Dude, bless his heart. Rick was a good dude in a lot of ways, man. Nobody's perfect, but I was really impressed with him as an individual and the way that he represented this company and the dignity and respect that he treated me by actually having a conversation with me after I didn't get the job. I got so many no's and no callbacks, and I just never felt like I had made an impact in all these people's lives that I had interviewed with. And it felt shitty being rejected. Even though I didn't get the gig, I know I didn't feel like I was rejected. Mike even mentioned that they were going to keep Rick mentioned, maybe Mike, I don't remember, they would keep my application on and maybe at a later time.
That was definitely something that Rick did, where he would, all the managers did. It was just, you're not idiots, right? You're like, that person was kick-ass. I'm going to keep their application here. So then what happened? How did you end up getting the gig? Because the Florissant store was more comic-oriented by a significant margin. I mean, their sales breakup was like 75-25 comics over games, right? Yeah. But you ended up working at the flagship location that did more gaming than comics, about 60-40.
I got to come work for the professional game master is what I got to do.
Well, so now hold on. How did you get the call that we'd like you to come back in for another interview?
I think I had to go ask you a couple of times, Mike.
You had to ask me more than once?
Little did I know that every day at the fantasy shop in St. Charles was not Free Comic Book Day back issue day. Dude, I went up. I was just like, I was going to follow up on, be like, hey, just making sure you know I'm here. I'm still interested in working for your retail location. This seems like fun. And I walked in, and there's hundreds of fucking people at this store. You did not have time to talk to me.
I did not.
And I walk in, they're doing their massive back issue sale where they pull out a warehouse of back issues and put it into their promo space where they normally have open gaming. No way, man. This place is like standing room only, and I'm like, what the fuck am I getting into? But I understand he doesn't have time for me. And it was intimidating, and I probably browsed around a little bit, but I did not know what was going on. I did not go there for those events. I went there to hopefully seek gainful employment, because I certainly didn't have a penny to spend on stuff at the time. And so I remember that was one, pursuit, maybe a month or two after the conversation with Rick. And then I think either you called me or I followed up. You asked me to follow up closer to the end of the summer when Rob Entwistle was moving on to his career as a teacher. He was one of the staple, solid clerks that the St. Charles store had. Really treated people with, the comic customers freaking loved this guy. And he had finished his school career, or his schooling, and was about to go maybe do, his residency for school or something like that.
Yeah, his student teaching or however that works,
Yeah, so I was able to get the gig at the beginning of August.
So Rob is leaving because he's pursuing a different career.
Yep.
You end up getting hired on, but then, and obviously...
Was there anyone I had to fight for that, Mike? Remember?
I don't believe that there was no combat requirement to fill that position. But yeah, I mean, there was a time, man, where we just had, there were always half a dozen applications of good people where we just didn't, we're hiring. Okay, we'll call so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and see if they want to come in.
Yeah. It was solid. Yeah, we love that. We want to keep an eye out for good people that have some good experience and try to make sure we're populating the crew with a good diversity of voices and skill sets, and more importantly, good attitudes and personalities that can bring something good to the team, and taking care of customers, man. That's number one, is taking care of the community.
You, much like myself, came in as just a rank and file clerk, right? Or as we like to call it, the ambassador for the hobby. You're on the sales floor, you're talking to people, you're bullshitting, you're doing your thing. How long was it before you ended up starting to climb the management ladder?
David Kelly Wallace at the time were on their way to go on the road and do mentorship programs and consultation for other business owners in the industry. They were about to travel the country and get in the RV, and they had been grooming you to be the general manager. So about a year after I got hired on is when Dave and Kel hit the road again, and you stepped into the general manager's seat. You became the number one that was at the helm while your boss and owner, Dave and Kelly Wallace, were on an away mission, so to speak.
Oh, sure. I love it.
You had big shoes to fill, Mike. And
the show's not about me, John. I want to talk about your journey and who you are and what you've enjoyed. You've been very kind to me this whole weekend. We don't need to talk about you filling my shoes. I want to talk about you and what you have done and how the company is better in my absence.
I appreciate that sentiment a lot. And I'm going to have to emphasize the fact that I would not have known what management was, what being a leader was, especially for this company and in this industry, without your experience and example, learned a lot from you. And I credit you as much as I remember to.
Right.
And I should credit you more for the good habits you instill.
You
also had a lot of confidence in me. You saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and you had my back through that time.
Appreciate it.
So we're going to go around to, go ahead.
Your opinion of me means a lot. And I've spent a lot of my life concerned about what people think about me, but I've realized that it doesn't matter that the shitbags don't like you. I care what you think about me, but the audience doesn't want to listen to that. They want to hear about you and about what your job is at the fantasy shop and what you do and what you like. And frankly, considering the distance that we have left on this road, John, we don't have time to talk. We don't have time to talk about me, John. So unfortunately, I'm going to turn it back to you. So after a year, you become a store manager. And you're managing...
I was assistant manager for a year.
I'm sorry, okay.
I worked with Dawn at the St. Charles, the flagship store. Dawn was a new manager, and she needed help organizing the events. One of the most proud things that I had done during that time there is I had gotten to help organize the events in the event space. We had a lot of space and a lot of people wanting to do things in the store. I got to do the event management thing and help to organize those people and build those relationships. Honestly, around when that was like really getting off the ground is when I got to be the store manager of the Florissant location, at the location that I did not actually get hired on for originally. And there were some big shoes to fill. The guy who had run that shop has been in that shop for 25 years.
He was there for a very, very long time. And when he left, it was difficult because he had really established himself not just as a permanent thing at that shop, but in that community. I mean, if you lived in my area where I live today and you read comic books, dude, you knew this guy.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't your regular shop, you were in there because this guy was so good and knew his stuff so well. But he leaves and you end up taking over his shop, which, by the way, this is not to deride him, especially since he's no longer with us, but sales within, I remember looking at the numbers, within 4 weeks, 6 weeks, the store's doing better than it had in years. And that's the truth.
I remember seeing some, I haven't looked at it in a long time. Yeah, it was pretty marked increase in sales. And I was incredibly fortunate, again, it's, the timing that you meet them and how to handle new people. Like, I was blessed by the community that welcomed me in. Like, those were big shoulders to stand upon. And I've always felt that in this industry, in this company especially, is that my accomplishments simply are there helping to build upon the groundwork that the people before me did. I did not build anything from the ground up here. There are other more intelligent, more strategically minded, talented, passionate people that have done that before me. I simply was very fortunate to bring a very high level of enthusiasm, a mindfulness of what can we do to please more people? What kind of products can I bring in? What kind of events can I run? I took the event scheduling stuff from the St. Charles flagship store and we brought more events back to this store. I started playing. I didn't like Magic the Gathering. I didn't know Magic the Gathering very well. I wasn't good at that game or organizing those events. And Magic, it's a lot to manage. And there wasn't a whole lot of a Magic presence in Florissant. So I brought more tournaments there. And we brought more gaming stuff there. And I brought more of the things that I knew and was passionate about. And I was able to rely on some really talented, passionate, amazing clerks that were there that had a well of knowledge that could take care of our comic customers because they grew up buying comics from Rick. And I feel like we've just gotten to pass the torch from person to person and be able to build upon what we've done. So, dude, we rocked it. Those teams were really, really good.
But then you transition from managing that location to eventually becoming what?
I went back to the St. Charles location after 3 years, and I got to be the store manager of the St. Charles location, the flagship location. In the time that I was away from St. Charles, another amazing individual, Jess, she took a little bit of the seeds that I had planted with event organization and brought it to the most organized that we had seen in that space. She was fantastic.
So,
she was on the ball.
But Jess took over because you moved back to the office.
No.
Okay, all right.
No. I came over when St. Charles was moving to its new location, and Jess left shortly after the store.
Oh, you're right. I'm just an old person.
And this is also around the time when you left the company, Mike. So there was the owners were coming back to.
I had rage quit, and Jessica was miserably unhappy, and there's a lot of stuff going on that we need to get into. But ultimately,
it was a lot, man, and it was hard to see what this company could look like without these people that had been pillars of each of their stores. And holy crap, you guys did a lot of work, and it's hard to follow up your act. Eventually, I became store manager and also did things that you were doing in the office. I started taking on the mantle as game buyer. I essentially, because you had been on vacation before, I started talking to our reps and the distributors. I started talking to the people that we were getting products from and making sure that artery still flowed through that transition period. I got to make sure that people were communicating as best as they could. I tried to keep our customers happy during this time in transition. I tried to reassure them like we still were taking care of them, right? I think we did an all right job. And we had new staff. I don't think that we're doing better than you were. I think that we're doing it differently.
I would argue, and I say this because we have to wrap up here because we are about out of studio time.
It's too much.
No, it's not too much. We're about to approach my home. And I would invite you inside to continue the conversation, but I know the second I put an actual microphone in front of you, you're going to freeze, and my wife is going to be pissed because she wants her goddamn space. Not because she doesn't love you, because she does, but you just know how she is.
Yeah, and I can be alone.
So what I'm going to do, John, is so you go into the office, and basically you do everything that I did with one exception, and that is managing the managers. Is that fair?
I did a lot of things, and until recently, there were still a number of things that were not on my plate, and there's still a lot that I don't do for sure.
Well, how about this, John? This is what I'd like to do. This is where I would like to end the interview.
Where am I going from here?
I'm sorry. You want to turn right, get all the way over to the left-hand lane.
Got it.
I'm going to ask you a question, and it's douchey and lame. Keep going straight. But it's going to be a throwback. If you remember your second interview at the end, the last question I asked you in your second interview was about your first. If you had this to do over again, what would you do differently?
I would have stopped and gotten gas and used the restroom about half an hour ago.
Perfect. Well, so for you, John, what's great is that we're going to come up here to this, not this light, but the next light. You're going to turn left. There's a mobile station right there. We can get it knocked out. That's fantastic. John Perks.
No.
I love you, John. No, go ahead, John.
Are you asking if...
So remember your second interview, and I said, hey, if you could do your interview over again, is there anything that you would do differently? Now, if you remember from training, there are poor answers, but the only wrong answer is, no, it's cool. I did great. If you don't have the ability to go back to yourself and say, fuck, I screwed this up, I screwed that up, I paused too much, I said too many, whatever. My point was, John, is that through the course of the entire weekend and the entire conversation that we've had in the car that we've been recording and the hours of conversation both ways to and from, you are a wise, introspective, open-minded individual, and you are sincerely, because I know I bloviate and I blow smoke at people, you are truly one of the most remarkable people I have had the pleasure to know as a friend, to work with as a professional, and you are truly one of my favorite people of ever. And I want to say thank you, John Perks.
It's been my honor. Mike Broder, I owe a lot to you, and I am honored to call you a friend.
I'm sorry, John, we're running out of battery, buddy. Sorry. So I'm a good friend. Thanks, buddy. Thank you. Go straight.
And if I had this all to go back through, I would have given a little bit more thought to each beat of this story in a way. My story's not remarkable. My story's not that special. I like to think about stories. I love to reflect upon the people that have brought me to this point. And I could have given you these beats in a little more concise fashion for your listeners.
That is what audio editing is for, John.
I hope I was entertaining. I hope this was entertaining for you all. I'm super excited that Mike's doing this. We'll see if he gets me on the mic again. I'm sure I could be about other shit.
I know that you are apprehensive about doing this, and I know that for you this was a challenge. That's the one you want, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that it was a challenge to know that other people are going to be listening to your words, but your words are good ones.
I want to do honor by everyone that I may speak about or speak to, and it's important that they know they're all amazing too, and I'm grateful for all of you.
John Perks, thank you so much. If I'm lucky, I'll have you on the show again, and maybe sometime we'll do it in the studio here, and we'll get a little loose.
And a little better audio quality.
Oh, the audio quality will be
fun.
Yeah, for sure. John Perks, thank you so much. Why We Game is a production of the Influence Foundation. All rights reserved. Audio editing by Brodor. Music by Owen Godwin.